By removing the Great Movie Ride, Disney didn't just retire an old attraction. They removed the very heart of what that park was supposed to represent.
Hooray for Hollywood, where you're terrific if you're even good.
Long before highly themed movie and franchise-based lands became the norm inside of the top theme parks of the world, before adults could walk around in hundreds of dollars of character merch and live-action roleplay their sci-fi fantasy in the same lines as Make-A-Wish kids, there was a single attraction that allowed you to be put inside the movies, much like these lands do. Amidst the crowded walkways and the unforgiving Florida heat, stepping into the Chinese theater truly felt like stepping into another world. For nearly half an hour, and yes, that's how long this ride was, you could take a break from the theme park reality and step into a movie reality. You could leave behind the noise and the exhaustion of the park and instead embark on a journey through cinema itself. Scene by scene, you weren't just a spectator. You were a passenger traveling through the emotions that define film. Excitement, heartbreak, fear, anticipation, joy. From musicals that made audiences believe in dreams to gangster films that defined grit and suspense, this ride was a living anthology of stories that have cemented themselves into our collective imagination. It wasn't just a ride, it was a love letter to the movies and the art of filmmaking itself. I'm definitely not the first and certainly not the last person to notice this or say this, but I truly believe that the closure of the Great Movie Ride was the final nail in the coffin for Hollywood studios and the Disney company itself. And this is coming from a diehard fan, a closeted Disney adult, someone who just got into pin trading this year, and someone who's done six run Disney races, I believe, and has been to all of the parks coast to coast. So yeah, I am qualified to talk on this. Back in the early 2000s, when I first started going to Disney, Hollywood Studios was still called MGM, and MGM was hands down my favorite park. It had this sort of unmatched magic and spark that I don't think any other park at the time had. If Magic Kingdom was a fairy tale fulfilled, then MGM was a fantasy fulfilled, and a bug just flew across the fucking camera. For me, it was a perfect blend of adrenaline, wonder, and pure escapism. And that was the heart of the Disney difference, which was their whole campaign at the time. They literally coined the phrase for a reason. It wasn't about cutting corners or relying on cheap thrills. It was about creating worlds you could step into. Worlds that felt alive. They weren't just rides. They were physical, larger-than-life sets that warped your sense of reality in a good way and wrapped you in a story and made you forget that the outside world existed. The lighting, the detail, the physical, practical sets will never be able to be replicated by screens, in my opinion. And that's what's missing now. Everything feels like a shortcut. Everything now is screen-based, fast, and marketable. It's less about transporting you to another world and more about squeezing in another intellectual property or IP. And while there's still flashes of brilliance here and there, the old school Disney magic that I grew up with, the kind that made you believe, has long been feeling like it's fading for a lot of people. I think the Great Movie Ride was perhaps more impactful than we remember. The ride itself gave way to the opening of Disney's third theme park in 1989. The Great Movie Ride was originally planned as the main attraction in a show business themed pavilion at Epcot, which was to be called Great Moments at the Movies. However, the newly assigned CEO, Michael Eisner, and head of Disney Imagineering, Marty Sklar, decided that the idea was strong enough to lead an entirely new theme park. This, I think, also was likely in part to three main things. The first, and probably most influential in their decision, Universal was literally doing this down the street, building a Studios theme park. They basically jacked Universal's entire concept of a Studios park and then beat them to opening. Second, the new CEO, Michael Eisner, came from Paramount and had a background in the movie industry. And lastly, it makes sense for a company that originally got their start in film and animation to build a park around that very concept. The Great Movie Ride was located inside a recreation of the famous Hollywood landmark Grauman's Chinese Theater. The park's Chinese theater is a full-scale replica of the original building and Imagineers used the original building's 1927 blueprints in the construction of the Parks Theater. Inside the theater, which was one of my favorite parts as a kid, the ride queue featured display cases containing actual costumes, props, and set pieces from various films. The ride vehicles themselves utilized the traveling theater style of ride system. They were grouped together in pairs of two and featured an open cab in the front row of the vehicle for a live tour guide to stand, provide narration, and operate the ride vehicle. I think also a fun part about the ride was that there were two separate show scenes that you could potentially get, or two different versions of the ride, an A version and a B version. One of them being a cowboy scene, cowboy showdown scene, and the other one being a gangster showdown scene, which is when, if you've been on the ride, the cast member gets stolen by either the cowboy or the gangster, and then for a portion of the ride is narrated by the cowboy or the gangster. I'm a huge theme park fan, not just Disney fan, and I love dark rides. So when I was researching for this video, I had an absolute ball reading some of the stuff that's out there on dark rides. Joel Zika, a Texas A&M professor who spent 6 years on his PhD research, his PhD, The Dark Ride, Reimagined for Virtual Experience, highlights the ways that dark rides are especially efficient at immersive storytelling. The dark ride offers one distinctive example of how technology and entertainment would become closely interlinked. The ability to create dynamic, immersive experiences with technology brought innovative new types of narrative spaces to audiences to view and participate in. It is an architecture of narrativity where the script is drawn as a map through space. In fact, while reading his paper, I started to notice parallels between the Great Movie Ride, not just as a dark ride, but also as reverence to the art of filmmaking. The technique of mapping a space in order to deliver a particular sequence of experiences can still be seen in the way that cinema operates to this day. Entrusting oneself to a small trolley or boat entering a darkened space is a unique experience among entertainments. The moving camera that the trolley embodies effectively offers you the ultimate in cinematic long takes. Essentially, you are the camera, mapping the landscape, surveying the set pieces, choosing what to engage in with your direct field of vision. Your own eyes become the camera lenses. Not unlike a play where the actors are on a stage or a movie set where characters interact with intentionally designed facades. Though here I'd argue you no longer embody the passivity of an audience member, but instead engage in the much more active role of a cameraman. And I think in this way, the Great Movie Ride separates itself from other dark rides. This ride didn't just talk about the movies, it placed you directly in them. Giant physical sets surrounded you, practical effects came alive, and cast members pulled you directly into the story. It was the kind of full-bodied immersion that Walt Disney had always championed. No shortcuts, no gimmicks. It was just that beautiful alchemy of storytelling, artistry, and theater. The Great Movie Ride wasn't just another attraction. It was the physical embodiment of what Hollywood Studios was meant to be. At its core, it was an ode to the art of filmmaking, a living, breathing celebration of cinema's history, despite having very little to do with the Walt Disney Company's own properties. In fact, a number of the properties that were featured, they had to get rights for. They had to buy those. And despite this, from concept to execution, it felt like something Walt himself would have been proud of, because it checked every box of what defined his vision: educational, imaginative, and rooted in the art that built the Disney empire in the first place. By removing the Great Movie Ride, Disney didn't just retire an old attraction. They removed the very heart of what that park was supposed to represent. MGM, or Hollywood Studios, was built as a love letter to the art of filmmaking. Replacing its titular ride with another screen-heavy, IP-driven filler experience was more than just a questionable design choice. It was a failure on multiple levels. A failure to honor film history, a failure to respect the park's original vision, and honestly, a failure to uphold the kind of immersive and educational storytelling that Walt pioneered. Screens can't replicate the feeling of walking through Casablanca's fog, or standing face to face with the Wicked Witch of the West, or riding out of the gangster shootout that unfolds right in front of your vehicle. That kind of theater and artistry is irreplaceable. The Great Movie Ride was a museum, a time machine, a moving theater, a stage play all in one. And tearing it down didn't just close an attraction, it closed the curtain on the very identity of Hollywood Studios. Now when you walk through Hollywood Studios, it doesn't feel like a park celebrating the golden age of film anymore. It feels like a commercial break that you can't escape from. Everywhere you look, Disney's trying to sell you something, usually their latest streaming content, Instead of honoring the art of cinema, it's about pushing you the next Disney Plus show, the next Marvel installment, the next branded experience designed to funnel you back into a subscription. And I know you've seen this. It's super bizarre when you walk out of, I think, Toy Story Land and you start making your way down towards like the main entrance of Hollywood Studios. There's a fucking billboard for Hulu. For Hulu Plus that says like Disney now has Hulu Plus. Nothing takes you more out of the immersion than a fucking billboard for a streaming service. It's not about transporting you to a timeless world anymore. It's about reminding you to buy something, to buy a subscription service when you get home. The Great Movie Ride represented Hollywood itself, the craft, the artistry, the storytelling legacy that Walt knew was worth preserving and celebrating. Replacing it with a thinly veiled advertisement for the latest IP is just disheartening. It's proof that the company has shifted from sharing the magic of film to selling the product of film. And in that shift, the park has lost its soul. I wish that they kept the Great Movie Ride, maybe not as a ride, but as a museum, or continued to update it with I would even take them updating it with their current IP or their current properties or things that they're trying to push or their classic movies. I wouldn't even care. I wouldn't care if the Muppets took it over. In fact, I think that would have been a fantastic addition to the park. But getting rid of it altogether feels so wrong, and to this day, I have not forgiven them. And I won't. Ironically enough, this shift also mirrors something equally disappointing in the film industry itself. More and more, we're seeing the sheer lack of creativity and risk-taking when it comes to new and original movies or TV shows, but particularly movies. Everything is a sequel or a biopic or an adaptation of an existing work. And honestly, it's more than just disappointing. It feels insulting. An insult to the adults who pour thousands of dollars into their Disney trip, and an insult to the intelligence of today's kids. When I was a kid, the parks felt massive. They weren't just playgrounds of familiar characters that I watched at home. They were gateways into worlds I had never experienced before and would and could never experience anywhere else. I was exposed to new ideas, larger-than-life sets, and experiences that challenged my imagination in ways nothing else could. And that's what made it magical. You couldn't get it anywhere else. But now the parks are so dominated by IP, it's everywhere you look, and it's the same characters they have at home on their TVs on Disney+. Instead of broadening their horizons or sparking curiosity, the parks have just been serving up more of the same. Flashy, recognizable, and safe. Nothing that dares to be different or asks you to dig a little deeper. And I think kids deserve a lot more credit than that. They're capable of wonder, awe, and curiosity, but Disney isn't giving them a chance to experience it. By relying on screens and recycled IP over and over and over again, they're robbing kids of the formative, mind-expanding experiences that defined Disney trips back in the day. It's not just a creative failure, it's a betrayal of the very thing that made the parks so powerful in the first place. Not only that, the Great Movie Ride sort of served as a film 101 for kids or even adults. Like, I remember being on that ride and my mom pointing out these movies, and granted, my mom's not even that old. She's like, what, 55? So she was pointing out movies like Casablanca and Singing in the Rain and saying like, oh, I remember watching those like in my house growing up with my mom. The disappearance of the Great Movie Ride also is part of this trend that I don't think Disney gives a shit anymore about history and education. And yeah, you can argue that Epcot still is that, but why the fuck is Guardians of the Galaxy in Epcot? It makes no sense there. Not at all. I also think, as somebody who works in marketing and has an affinity for marketing, it is an absolute tragedy to replace something that's historical and about art and filmmaking with something that's more marketable to children, like Mickey Mouse. And I like Runaway Railway or whatever the ride is called, but in no way does it measure up to the same like value in terms of education and art and everything to the Great Movie Ride. It just doesn't. And I think kids deserve more credit than that. They're capable of wonder, they're capable of thinking, they're capable of using their brains, they're capable of expanding their minds, they're capable of appreciating good art. They're capable of discerning what's bad art. But when all you put in front of them is the same characters they've seen a million fucking times and the same songs that they sing at home, why spend all that money to go to Disney? It's not just a creative failure. It's a betrayal of what made the parks so special in the first place. And I know that there's a lot of discourse online right now about the decisions that Disney has been making. And from a theme park fan perspective, I will probably still continue to go to Disney World because there's a lot of things that I do like. But every time I go to Hollywood Studios, I remember just how angry it makes me that the Great Movie Ride is no longer there. And I hope that by the time I have kids and my kids are old enough to experience Disney for the first time, that I can give them the same experience that I had. And I hope that by then it's not fucking Bluey's Adventure World with Moana and Frozen and Friends sing along bullshit nonsense. I hope it's more than that. And if you need me, I will be watching full ride POVs of the Great Movie Ride until the day that I die. I know in the last video I mentioned that I was working on a couple Adventure Time videos, and some people commented that they were excited and looking forward to those, which is really cool to have people excited about a project I just started. I've been reading this book, Analyzing Adventure Time, Critical Essays on Cartoon Network's World of Ooh. It's fucking amazing so far, and I've been holding off on filming the Adventure Time videos just because I want them to be perfect because that show is so near and dear to my heart. So I decided to make this video this week instead, but hopefully in the coming weeks I will have those Adventure Time videos ready. As you can see, hold on, I have been really annotating and highlighting this book. But thank you for watching. If you are a closeted Disney adult yourself, leave a comment. I also learned that video hypes are a thing now, so if someone wants to hype my video, apparently it's really good for small channels, so please help me. I only have 72 subscribers, but I am very grateful for all 72 of you. Please keep commenting, please keep liking, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm really trying to pursue this. It's so much fun to do. And as the infamous mouse would say, see you real soon. Bye.